Welcome you all to my YouTube channel, Let's Learn. Dear students, in the last part, means part 2, I have already told you that Mrs. Bethy told Maggie to show the ring to Mr. Gupta, and Maggie showed the ring. Mr. Gupta saw it, and he thought it was not a miraculous thing that anyone can see something through it or someone through it. I have already told you all about this in part 2. Now we will proceed to part 3. In this part, we will see the meeting between Mr. Gupta and Maggie, and it was time for Mr. Gupta to return India. Just at that time, Mr. Gupta wanted to visit Maggie's house once again to see what had happened. Now we will start part 3. Several months passed. Then Mr. Gupta visited Maggie and Mrs. When Mr. Gupta went to Maggie's house to visit Mrs. Bethy, at that time Mrs. Bethy was seriously ill. She was aggravated by the anxiety for Franky. Franky, her son. Always she was mourning, and perhaps she was bedridden at that time. Mr. Gupta thought, how can I console her mother? What can I say about Franky? Whether he is alive or dead. Only God knows about him. Then Maggie told Mr. Gupta that her mother was not ill like this before. And she also told Mr. Gupta that, oh dear Mr. Gupta, I have read in books that Indians are the lover of truth. They like to tell the truth. But for the sake of my mother, I want to request you to tell a lie. What is that lie? The lie is Mr. Gupta will say Maggie's mother that Franky is still alive. This is the thing. Maggie told Mr. Gupta to tell it before her mother. Now, Mr. Gupta was in a fix. What having a fix means he could not decide whether he will tell a lie or he will tell the truth. But then he thought that I am not a very virtuous person, very truthful person. So it will not be a serious crime for me to tell a lie. And if a lie will benefit others, then that will not be treated as a crime. Then Maggie brought the ring to Mr. Gupta, and Mr. Gupta approached Mrs. Bethy's bedside and wishing her a good morning, told her that Mrs. Bethy, your son Franky is alive and well. And you see, immediately when Mrs. Bethy heard that Mr. Gupta told her about her son, that he is alive and well, she raised her head from the pillow and tears of happiness welled up in her eyes. Welled up means appeared. You know that sometimes when we feel extremely happy, the tears of happiness rolls down from our eyes. Just like Mrs. Bethy became extremely happy and tears of happiness came from her eyes. And then very soon she recovered. Then it was almost time for Mr. Gupta to return to India. And he again thought to go to see Mrs. Bethy and Maggie. But then he decided not to go to them, and he thought to write a letter to, and at that time the family, means Maggie's family, was still in mourning. Mourning means lamenting. They were spending their time in a very sorrowful mood. And in the meantime, Maggie was well known that her brother had been killed in the war, in the fighting on the frontier. Frontier means the boundary line of a state or a country. And I have already told you that Franky was a soldier and he was working in the Punjab. And at that time there was a fighting, there was a battle, and perhaps he was killed at that time. It was well known to Maggie and also to the writer Mr. Gupta. And now Mr. Gupta calculated himself the day when he had told about Franky to his mother that Franky is well and alive just before some months or some days Franky had already died. So The writer, Mr. Gupta, felt ashamed himself. And he did not want to go to see them, to say them a goodbye. So he decided to write a letter to Maggie, announcing his departure and bidding them a now, the last day of the writer, Mr. Gupta, in London came to him. The last morning dawned there. Where? In London. And he was about to leave that night. So, you see, now it is morning and the writer will leave London that night and will come to me. And the writer was having his breakfast. When he was having his breakfast, he heard someone was knocking at his door. Knocking. You know, knocking? A sound. A striking sound. Someone striked at his door. Now, when Mr. Gupta opened the door, he saw there was Maggie and she was wearing black. Now, here black is a symbol of unhappiness. So, Maggie was wearing a black shirt and she had come to say goodbye to Mr. Gupta. And also asked, will you leave tonight? Then Mr. Gupta said yes. Then Maggie asked, how long it will take you to reach India? And in which part of the country do you live? Maggie asked. Mr. Gupta said, exactly, I don't know. But I have entered the Punjab service. And I will know when I will arrive there. I will know the exact place at that time. Then Maggie asked, is the frontier very far from there? Then Mr. Gupta said, no, it is not very far. It is near. It is near the frontier. Our frontier is very near. Then Maggie told him that my brother Franky is buried near the frontier. And when she told this, before Mr. Gupta, her eyes filled with tears and she could not speak. Her voice choked. And you see, this time, tears rolled down from the eyes of Maggie, and this tear is the tear of sorrowfulness. And just before, at the beginning of this part, when the tears rolled from the eyes of Mrs. Bethy, that was the tears of happiness. Now you see. Then Mr. Gupta said, when I will go to that part of the country, I will definitely visit your brother's grave and will definitely write to him about your mother, about everything. This is all about part 3. Now you see the difficult words and note it down. It will be very useful for you.